your direct feed for All That Is Sports. I'm your host, Alden K. Got Ricky K and Mike Patt along with me here today for episode 4 of the Bullpen Bulletin. A lot of news regarding baseball as we get closer to opening day. We'll talk about the Lawrence Butler contract extension, big news for the Athletics as they continue to get closer to a contending team, as they continue to pursue Vegas. We'll talk about the Garrett Cole injury as well, undergoing Tommy John surgery, big blow for the Yankees, and we'll see what happens next regarding the Yankees pitching, and obviously our spring training updates as well as injuries continue to push, but we'll also talk about the other games in spring training in Arizona and Florida once again as we get closer to the regular season. And then we're going to talk NL East as well. Who's going to win the division in the NL East? A bunch of teams that are up for grabs for that division. Obviously, a lot of contenders in the NL East. We'll talk about the division, give our 2 cents on every single team. And then, of course, our NCAA baseball and softball check-in. We'll talk about some teams that have been showing up and showing out for NCAA. And, of course, around the diamond, we'll talk a little bit about what's on our mind. A lot of baseball to talk about regarding everything MLB and minor league and NCAA. We will get to it here on the Bullpen Bulletin on the IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for All That Is Sports. We'll be right back once we hear a quick word from our sponsors. Do not go anywhere. We'll be back in a minute.
IE Sports Radio fans, this show is brought to you by Planet Jerky Premium Brisket Beef Jerky. Planet Jerky is the official jerky of the 2022 California League champion Lake Elsinore Storm, single-A affiliate of the San Diego Padres. This all-brisket jerky has gluten-free options, contains no MSG, no sodium nitrate, is low in sugar, and high in protein. Go to their website at planetjerky.net and follow them on Instagram at Planet Jerky. Planet Jerky, the jerky that's on a whole other planet.
Rise and shine. It's 4 a.m. The stars are still out. The sun is beneath the horizon, but it's time to punch in and go to work. The comfort of your warm-ups turns into the grinding out of your reps as the clinking and the clinking of the plates create a symphony of euphoria. There's no other feeling like it. Earn it, burn it, and take what's yours. IE Sports Radio has proudly partnered with Vital Apparel, a brand that not only fits great, but also promotes and donates to mental health research. Use our code IESR to get 15% off their comfortable and inspiring gym wear and help them on their amazing journey to support mental health. Go hard, take part in your iron therapy, and be strong. Because when your mental health is as strong as you are, there's no telling how far you'll go.
Hey there, IE Sports Radio fans. Be sure to check out our sponsor, Seal the Deal Wax Seals by Cecilia B. You just finished your very own wedding or baby shower invitations and you're looking for that extra special touch? Maybe you just wrote a letter to a relative or a friend and you want to add to their smile when they receive it. Then seal the deal with Cecilia's handmade sealing wax stamps for your invitations, letters, and gifts. You bring the deal, we'll bring the seal. You can find them on Instagram at sealthedeal_wax stamps and on Facebook, Seal the Deal Wax Seals.
For the last 10 years, IE Sports Radio has been bringing you amazing content ranging from interviewing legendary athletes, coaches, and other authorized media personnel to building tailor-made shows dedicated to all major sports cities around the country. Make sure to follow us at IE Sports Radio on X, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube to keep up with the latest in sports and with all of our shows. Also, make sure to check out our daily updated website at iesportsradio.com. At iesportsradio.com, you can see our daily show schedule and check out all of our show pages with personal bios to learn a little bit more about each of our awesome hosts. In addition to our show pages, you can catch the iSports Radio blog, Hall of Fame, Fans of the Month page, and our merchandise shop including t-shirts, tank tops, caps, long sleeves, hoodies, and more. For now over a decade here at IE Sports Radio, we've continued to be by the fans, for the fans, and we thank you all for your support and for making IE Sports Radio your direct feed for all that is sports.
And welcome back to the Bullpen Bulletin here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Once again, big shout out to our sponsors, Planet Jerky, Premium Brisket Beef Jerky, Vital Apparel, Seal the Deal Wax Seals, and of course, shout out to IE Sports Radio. Happy to be back here on another Tuesday evening. And make sure to check out our newer sponsor, Raw Nutrition Supplements. Use the promo code IESR to get 10% off. Guys, times are still tough. Prices are still up. So make sure to take advantage. Get as many discounts as you can on important supplements. And of course, make sure to follow us on X at BP_IESR. And of course, the Supporters Club link. But let's get right on into it. So I can't call them Oakland anymore, but the Athletics have extended Lawrence Butler to a 7-year, $65 million deal. And the final year has a club option, so through 2032. So we'll start with Ricky. What's your thoughts on this extension for the Athletics?
The A's are actually paying people, and it's great. Like, I think you look at a guy like Lawrence Butler, who 6th-round pick in 2018. He's only 24, going to be 25 in July, and you need pieces that are going to be part of your cornerstone, like your core of the franchise, especially if this team is going to move to Vegas in a couple of years. And you look at this A's team, Brent Rooker's a good name, but Butler's a guy you can build around. 22 home runs, and really he became bursting onto the scene in the second half when the A's were very quietly one of the more scarier teams in the American League, or at least a team you didn't want to play. And I know we'll get to the AL West in the future show, but a team that could be one of those surprises this year. So if you're the A's, you got to lock people up before they get in your free agency. Otherwise, they really don't want to stay there. So I kind of like the A's being proactive and actually spending some money. And that's what we've called for since we started the show, small market teams spending some cash, and good for Lawrence Butler. Hopefully he can keep that success he had in the second half last year going into this year.
Yeah, so for me, I actually think that this extension, it's first off, it's very team friendly for the Athletics. I looked at the details for it. He's making under $10 million a year for the first 4 years of the contract. He doesn't make at least 10 million until 2029 when the contract is more than halfway through. So this gives the Athletics, if they are willing to spend more money in the future, a lot more opportunities to really build their team. And even though they may not have a home right now, but the Athletics, I think that they really could be a scarier team than people tend to give them credit for. Not saying they're going to make a deep run or anything like that, but I do like the direction the Athletics are in, and that's something I never thought I'd hear myself say. But Mike, what do you think on the Lawrence Butler extension?
This is a fantastic deal for the Athletics. You're getting a young piece, like Ricky said, 22 home runs last year and over 800 OPS. A guy who, if he can keep that production consistent, or, the possibility, like we said, he's only 24, keep getting a little bit better. I mean, this deal could very easily look like a bargain. And I mean, these, early on in team control deals where you basically buy out the arbitration years usually end up looking like pretty good deals in the long run, even if maybe that player doesn't become like an all-star or a, super contributor. Even if he can continue at a reasonable pace, continue his production he had last year, this is going to be a very good deal. And I mean, when you think of guys who, hit home runs, have high OPSs, play decent defense in the outfield, you're not thinking less than 10 million on average over the course of a 7-year contract. You're thinking that guy's a 15 to 20 million dollar a year guy. So it's a great deal. It's a great move early on in the contract. And like Ricky said, it shows that the Athletics are finally willing to spend money, which is something that the fan base has been screaming at them to do for years. And now they're finally showing that commitment. Of course, after they leave Oakland, but there's a whole nother discussion topic.
Yeah, obviously them going to Vegas, you have to think they're going to be a bigger market soon. They may, have more money to spend in the future, but obviously, despite me still feeling bad for the situation, how it ended in Oakland, this is good news for Athletics fans, whether they're in Oakland or not. And this is a really good extension for the A's. Like I said, very team friendly too. And I know we don't have like a salary cap or anything like that, but if the A's are willing to spend more money, then this is just another good example of it. So, meanwhile, over in New York, some pretty bad news regarding their best pitcher, Garrett Cole, who is undergoing Tommy John surgery and will be out for the entire season of 2025. So, Ricky, you're the New York guy. I'll start off with you. Man, it's a big blow for the Yankees. What do you got on it?
Well, I think when you look at baseball injuries, it's Garrett Cole's elbow from last year, missed the first 2 or 3 months. It's kind of a ticking time bomb. And it was kind of just a matter of, you look at missing 2 months last year, plus only going 88 pitches in game 1 of the World Series, and Garrett Cole saying, "I'm gassed." We never see Garrett Cole say that. So there's a lot of warning signs, and you throw in the Yankees getting Max Fried. That's probably an indicator that something was up. And I think I like having Fried at least as an ace. But this is a blow not just for the Yankees, but for the game of baseball. I mean, all three of us were talking in our group chat today, and I was trying to think about how many pitchers in baseball can you consistently say that guy's going to give me 6 innings a night? And I think we came up with a list of about 15 pitchers in the game out of, let's say, about 150 starters or 160 plus starters in baseball. That's not good. Garrett Cole is kind of the last of a dying breed of aces. And just for a guy that had made 30 starts almost every year, except last year and the COVID year since 2016, it's a major blow for him. And hopefully he can work his way back. And I think he'll find a way to get back. But look, this is a major blow for the Yankees, because now you have to rely on Marcus Stroman, who they don't want to rely on, because if he goes 140 innings, his option vests for next year. You got to rely on Clark Schmidt, who just got his spring started. Will Warren's a nice piece, but now Will Warren has to actually do something in this rotation. Carlos Carrasco's there. I don't think the Yankees are doomed, but I don't think they're the favorites in the division, or at least the prohibitive favorites, because you take Cole out. You have Stanton, who knows what's going on with his elbows. It's amazing in itself that Stanton hit as many home runs as he did with bad elbows last year. I think they can survive, but you're not going to see them make a big trade until July because nobody's making trades right now. I mean, we're going to talk about a guy they could get later on, but right now they're going to have to just survive and hope they get to the deadline, and Brian Cashman's going to have to earn his money there.
Yeah, so when I first saw this injury, you already brought it up. I did think about the elbow injury he had last year, and I was like, wait, now he's going through the Tommy John surgery, like he couldn't have gotten that earlier, or maybe, something could have been looked at to prevent this Tommy John surgery.
I think it was partially torn last year. I'm not sure if it was torn. I feel like if it was, considering his mileage, the doctors would have probably told him to. I think now that it actually had a tear, I think Cole would have fought either way, but I think even getting a second opinion, he even finally realized, look, I got to get this. And at least he's getting it now to where next year he can come back in, let's say, June, if all things go right, and at least play a factor in 26.
Yeah, I also thought about, what the Yankees could do. Obviously not right now because, you brought up the players that they still have, and Luis Gil is also injured too. So I thought to myself, okay, could Brian Cashman maybe address the pitchers right now or wait until the trade deadline, which is more likely to happen? I did bring up the Diamondbacks have 7 capable starting pitchers on their team right now. Could they maybe make a call to the Yankees, give up one of them, maybe a Jordan Montgomery reunion, and get some type of return? And then I think Mike mentioned Kyle Gibson as well. Could the Yankees reach out to him? So if I'm the Yankees, obviously Cashman could wait it out, see how the Yankees do in the regular season, start off. But pitching is probably the most important thing in baseball. If you don't have good pitching, it doesn't matter how many runs you score, this and that. You don't have good pitching or guys that aren't healthy, it's going to come back to you. So definitely, I think Cashman will wait it out until the trade deadline. But at the end of the day, you may want to address the situation as soon as possible. Just, you can't be too careful. But Mike, what are your thoughts on Garrett Cole missing out on this season?
I mean, it's a huge blow. I mean, no matter how deep your pitching rotation is, you losing a guy like Garrett Cole, who, like Ricky mentioned, was one of those guys you could count on to go out there every night and give you 6 good innings, and who was regularly racking up the starts year in and year out before his elbow injury last year. It's a tough blow, and thankfully for the Yankees, they do have some pieces in place to be able to mitigate the damage, but it's still going to be a little bit of damage there for losing him at the end of the day. I don't know how feasible a trade would be right now, just because, and I think we're going to get into it in the next topic here, but a lot of teams are dealing with injuries. A lot of teams are dealing with uncertainty amongst their starting pitchers. It would not surprise me if even teams that have excess starters like the Diamondbacks, were kind of keeping their pieces kind of close to the chest right now, just to make sure they can get through spring training, because we still have 2 weeks to go in spring training. So imagine, a team out there that has some excess starters. If they traded one now, they turn around tomorrow and another one of their guys goes down, and now all of a sudden they're in this situation. So I don't think a trade is really a feasible option for them at this time. Now, I do think, signing one of the guys off the street, especially a veteran like Kyle Gibson, who would need some warm up, but a guy who's been around the league a while, probably keeping himself in pretty good shape to be ready to go this season. Maybe not be up to snuff for the first go around in the rotation, but maybe not too deep into the season. He's a guy who you could insert in and be able to give you some innings. So I think Gibson is a reasonable option, or the Yankees just kind of wait it out and stick with what they have. They do still have a reasonable starting 5. Is it otherworldly? No. But then again, you look across the division, the Red Sox don't have an otherworldly starting 5. The Blue Jays don't. We talked about the Orioles definitely don't right now. And then the Rays dealing with all of their issues with the new state, playing in a strange place. So they're not heavily disadvantaged at this time. So I think the Yankees wait it out. They see how the rest of the spring training develops. maybe they give guys like Gill and Freed a couple extra days just to be safe, because you don't want anything to happen to those two. But it's just rough, and like Ricky said, it's rough for the game of baseball because you never want to see one of the best pitchers go down, because that just degrades the value of what you're watching.
Yeah, and the fact that their division is somewhat dealing with the same issue too. I mean, the Red Sox, they have decent named pitchers, but can they show up? The Orioles, they lost their best pitcher. The Blue Jays, Max Scherzer at 40 years old is looking like their best pitcher right now. And then Tampa Bay, of course, dealing with their own. So yeah, he's definitely, and you also got to mention this. Max Fried has an injury history too. So another guy that you do not want to lose, and he's looking like the best available Yankees pitcher right now. So not too frightening for the Yankees as of right now, but it also really just depends on how they start the season. But speaking of injuries, yeah, spring training is yeah, it's going by quick, but injuries are going along with the games that are going on. So some spring training updates. We'll start off with Ricky. The injuries may be a big factor of spring training for not just the Yankees, but other teams as well. What you got for us as far as spring training updates?
Well, it's like Mike was talking about. It's pitchers galore getting injured, whether you have in Seattle, George Kirby being a key piece going down. I think that's going to be something to monitor for them because they're relying on their rotation. I think for me, I guess I'll keep it in the division. I'll do one in the American League, one in the National League. The AL with the Red Sox. Brian Bayo is going to start the year on the IL. Hopefully he's back in April, but we'll see. And then Lucas Giolito left his start today with hamstring tightness. So especially a guy coming back from injury. So we'll see what's going on with him. And then the Mets side, not as big a deal, but Francisco Alvarez has a fractured hamate bone in his left hand. He's going to miss 6 to 8 weeks. I don't think that's a big deal. It's more a big deal for Alvarez because he's got to find his development as a top young catcher, and he always seems to find a way to get injured. They still have Luis Torrens, who did a really good job defensively last year. I covered Torrens in the minor leagues when he was in the Yankee system, but he's developed a nice niche for himself. And they can always make a trade, and Mike might be familiar with a guy they might bring in, or a guy who used to be in New York, James McCann's available. Maybe James McCann comes back as a backup and can kind of be that vet along the way for the Mets. But overall, I think Alvarez's injury, and we'll get to them later, is not going to affect them too much considering, well, there's a guy with the last name Soto that's there, so they should be fine.
Yeah, so for spring training, I said last week I would take it over to the two Arizona teams that play in Mesa, and that's the Dodgers. Well, first off, injuries. Max Scherzer's looking like the best pitcher in Toronto right now, but he now has a thumb injury, which is pushing back his next start. So for Toronto, that's something to look at. But I kind of wanted to make a point, and I kind of laughed at this because this is how stacked the Dodgers team is. They sent Bobby Miller and their newest player that they signed from Korea, Ha-seong Kim, to the minor leagues. So I know Bobby Miller was coming off of a rough 2024, but I kind of laughed at that just because of how stacked the Dodgers team is that they have to send some of their best capable players to the minor leagues. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But of course, and then, there's the Diamondbacks. Their bats have still looked pretty good so far. But the other team that plays over in Mesa is the White Sox, and one of their players, Jacob Amaya, I don't know if I'm saying that name right. He's managing a hip injury, and he's a guy competing for the shortstop job over in Chicago. And I actually see our Chi-Town Weekly host Adam Karnick's in the chat. How you doing, Adam? And I didn't see Taryn's comment earlier. But yeah, regarding the White Sox, they're dealing with Amaya's dealing with an injury, and he's battling for the shortstop job. So I thought that was something to talk about. Colson Montgomery for the White Sox, he's looking pretty good in spring training as well. He's definitely looking like he's capable of being a big leaguer right away. So the teams over in Mesa regarding the Dodgers and White Sox, once again, that Dodgers news, I just thought it was so funny. They've spent all this money. They brought in all these players, and they have to send two of their potential good enough players in the minor leagues. So I thought that was kind of funny. But Mike, what you got for us regarding the spring training updates?
So I'm going to keep it close to home here, kind of, sticking with the theme of injuries. It's starting to rack up. I think, we were talking a couple weeks ago about, the Orioles and their pitching injury history going back through the last couple of years. And right on cue, we have Grayson Rodriguez, the player who was projected to be the ace of the staff, coming into the season, gets hurt and has an undetermined, or what's the word, an indefinite timeline for his return, which I never like to see because, in my experience with my favorite teams, is the indefinite usually means think longer than shorter for the return time. So that's really rough, and especially a guy who dealt with a couple of different injuries. In fact, I believe going back through his history, even to the minors, this is the 4th consecutive year that he has dealt with some form of ailment or injury. So not the greatest sign for the young pitcher who was poised to step up and try to replace Corbin Burns. That's not looking like that's going to happen this year. Also, Gunnar Henderson did the player whose jersey I was wearing on this show last week. He has an injury. Manager Brandon Hyde came out and said he is not likely to start the season. So that's great news when your all-star MVP candidate shortstop can't go to start the season as well. And that's on top of the injuries that still haven't healed from last year in Kyle Bradish, Tyler Wells, Jorge Mateo, handful of guys who were hurt last year, still hurt to start this year. The depth on the infield is starting to rapidly thin out. Thankfully, we had some reinforcements there, so not looking too shabby. Also, and it's a topic that we discussed, by the way, to answer Adam Karnick's comment, Eloy Jimenez is no longer with the Orioles, so I actually don't know what his injury status is at the moment, but he is not.
I think he's in Tampa Bay now.
Yeah, that sounds right, that he's in Tampa Bay. But in any case, I hope he's not injured because, regardless of, what you think of him as a player, he actually brought a really good energy and a really fun energy to the clubhouse. So, regardless of that. But a topic that we all discussed kind of in our chat throughout the week, and I still have not heard any resolution or solution to the Rafael Devers, Alex Bregman situation in Boston. That is still ongoing, and the regular season's coming up fast. And I think one of you guys mentioned that Devers hasn't really even played yet in spring training. So very interesting that is still ongoing. Maybe not at the forefront of the news, but we talked about this when we talked about the AL East. It's a very competitive division. Some teams, if there's drama distracting you, that could play a key part in the season. So I'm curious to see how that situation resolves itself with just 2 weeks to go.
I think as of right now, he was supposed to play this week, and I think Alex Cora said it got pushed back to this weekend, but there was no injury news or anything on that. So, like you said, who knows what's going on?
Right.
And normally when a player doesn't get a good spring training in, they tend to have a poor regular season. So hopefully for the Red Sox case, that doesn't transition into the regular season, especially with a situation like that. But speaking of the East, when we come back, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the NL East, and we're going to go through each team, and we're going to predict that division. So don't go anywhere. When we come back, we will talk some NL East baseball here on the Bullpen Bulletin, here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Hello, sports fans. It's me, your boy Larry B, and I want to walk you through the world of sports. No, not just the mainstream major TV deal type sports, although those are important too. But let me be your guide for your journey of all sports, from college to the pros, the minors, and everything in between. Each week, we are talking sports galore with true diehards just like you from a hardcore fan's perspective that's sure to quench your thirst around leagues you may know all too well and some you may even discover here. That's right, sports fans. If you love sports of all kinds, Enjoy hearing amazing sports stories and respect all sports, because you know how difficult any of them can be to play or compete in, then this is your show. Join me, your boy Larry B, on the defining moment each week here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports, and let the sports come to you.
What's up, everybody? It's your boy, Big Mike from Indie Sports Nation. Come hang out with me each and every Friday, 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time, where we talk things Indiana sports. We talk Colts, Pacers, Fever, Indy Ignite, and we dive into the college scene as well. Boilermakers, Hoosiers, Irish, Bulldogs, and every school in between. And we don't stop there. We'll sprinkle in some NHRA and cover the IndyCar Series. From the turf, to the hardwood, to the track. We got you covered. Come hang out with your boy, Big Mike. Each and every Friday, 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Indie Sports Nation. Right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
And welcome back to the Bullpen Bulletin here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. If you guys are just now tuning in, we just covered the Lawrence Butler contract extension, the Garrett Cole injury, and of course our spring training updates involving injuries and other games. And now we're going to jump into the NL East. Last week we covered the AL East. We're staying in the East, covering the National League now. And we're going to start off with Mike, Washington Nationals. So the Nationals made a couple pretty good moves. They had a decent offseason, and they are a very young team that have a chance to make some noise this season and really send a message to the MLB that they can be something in the future. So what do you think about the Nationals this season over in the DMV area?
Yeah, I thought the Nationals had a pretty solid offseason. I know a lot of the fans were hoping, okay, um, Patrick Corbin comes off of the books, his contracts, his 20-something million dollar contracts no longer hitting the cap. Steven Strasburg retired. A lot of money was coming free. They're like, oh, this is our opportunity to make the big free agent signing. And well, yes, I would have liked to have seen that. I don't know if one major marquee signing would have necessarily been a grand leap for this team. Even if they had been able to get like a Juan Soto, which would have been an amazing story for Soto to return to DC after the trade to San Diego and play with all of the guys who the team got back in the trade. That was a pipe dream. Was it ever a reality? Probably not. It sucks that he went in the division, but it is what it is. But you look at this team, and I mean, the theme, and it's the same theme that they had last year. It's youth, right? It's all about the young guys. It's all about the continued development. Last year, the focus was on guys like CJ Abrams, Luis Garcia, James Wood, Dylan Cruz towards the end of the season. Now it's going to be, do those guys take the next step? You saw some great flashes from Wood, some great flashes from Cruz. Abrams, can we not have any more casino drama to end our season? Let's stay out of the casinos and the nightclubs, please. No more of that. Garcia, who the fans knew. I don't know if most of the league knew, but he kind of surprised everybody by coming out and having an excellent season last year. Can he repeat that? And then they did still add some veteran presences. They went out and they traded for Nate Lowe from the Rangers to give themselves a solid first baseman, a spot that they really had not had solidified for some time. They also went out and added Josh Bell, a good veteran hitter who provides a solid DH, backup first base, pinch hit bat. Not anybody who's going to move the needle, but somebody who's been around the league and can be a positive influence on this team. I think the lineup from top to bottom has a ton of potential. With young teams, it's all about getting in that rhythm and not getting in slumps, because young teams, they tend to have these high peaks and high valleys, and can they dig themselves out of that valley? That's a question that I had for the Orioles when they were super young back in 2022, 2023. Well, I guess the Orioles are still super young, but can this team deal with the ebbs and flows that comes with growing and developing into the MLB? The pitching concerns me. Not going to lie. Again, it's still young. We had a series of starters who actually started off the year quite well. I think at one point, Jake Irving was down to like a 2.5 or 2.6 ERA about midway through the season, but then he had a second half collapse. Mitchell Parker had a second half collapse. Mackenzie Gore struggled a little bit in the second half. Can these young guys who have proven that they can start strong, can they finish strong, and can more of the young reinforcements, a couple of guys who we've been waiting for a few years, Josiah Gray, Cade Cavalli, some of these higher rated pitching prospects, can they overcome in their cases, injury woes and join this group and add even more youth and more potential? The bullpen is going to be okay. I would be happy with okay. Again, you're relying on a combination of youth with very little experience, in fact, even less experience than the other spots, along with some veterans who, Jorge Lopez, who's kind of bounced around the league and had success in some places, less success in others. Kyle Finnegan, who's been the team's closer for a few years, but he's had his struggles late in seasons. And then there was another veteran, Derek Law, who was very good for the team last year. So it's going to be an interesting combination, and it's going to be curious to see how all of the pieces work together and how they play it. But I think the organization has shown over the past couple of years, since they kind of bottomed out post Juan Soto trade, post World Series, that they are willing to have patience. They are willing to let these guys get in these games, make their errors. It's just, will they continue to learn and continue to develop and take that next step in a division that is not particularly easy to make that leap?
Yeah, I think for the Nationals, I think their season's going to depend on their pitching. Mackenzie Gore had almost an ERA of 4 last year. And of course, they have guys that were in the farm system that they could call back up here pretty soon. And I think the most important thing about the Nationals that I like, they have a proven manager. They have a manager that's capable of really he's already experienced being a champion, so he can guide any team, whether it's a young team, a team that's trying to win now. He knows what it takes to win. So I think that's the most important thing to have when you're a rebuilding team, is a guy that can guide the younger players, that can really know what it takes to get back to the World Series. And, the Nationals, it wasn't that long ago. And now that they have this young team, I mean, building their team through the farm system is something that we normally see a lot of small market teams do. And that's what the Nationals are doing. So I do think that the Nationals can really, I wouldn't say, not saying they're going to make a deep playoff run or anything like that, but I think that the Nationals can really look good this year in terms of really, like I said earlier, sending a message to fans like, hey, in the future, we're going to be a team to deal with in the National League. So I really do like the way the Nationals are going so far. Ricky, you want to take everything over to South Beach and talk some Miami Marlins baseball. So what you got for the Marlins?
I don't even know what the Marlins have for the Marlins, but nevertheless, Clayton McCullough's the first-year manager coming over from the Dodgers and that World Series coaching staff. And he's got a lot of work ahead of him. The Marlins only made 2 major league signings this offseason. Cal Quantrill, who's going to be in the back of their rotation, and Eric Wagaman, who I also covered in Staten Island years ago. He's in the majors, and he is at first base. Look, this is a rough one for Miami. They're not spending money. They dealt players away like Jake Burger to Texas, Jesus Luzardo to the Phillies. There's probably more moves they have to make, I think, before they can really find their core in future years. But there are some young players to watch. Xavier Edwards at shortstop. He's a guy that hit the ball well, but they want him to improve on defense. We'll see if he does that this year at shortstop. Connor Norby, of course, coming over from the Orioles. Got to get a chance to play at third base. We'll see what he can do. You got Jesus Sanchez in the outfield, along with Kyle Stowers and Derek Hill. But the big thing is the pitching. The Marlins have lacked offense, but they've always had pitching. And Sandy Alcantara has looked really good this spring. And I was hinting at it earlier. That's a guy that I think the Yankees should go after. Remember, they made the Jazz Chisholm trade last July, and the Marlins really seem to like the Yankee system. A lot of the guys in the Yankees people in the Yankees front office usually end up going to Miami. So they know that farm system very well. Wouldn't be shocked if that happened. But they have Edward Cabrera. Unfortunately, Yuri Perez is still hurt, but Max Meyer's another name to watch. They don't really have a closer in the bullpen right now. In fact, their bullpen could potentially be all right-handers to open the season, which not usually very good. Look, they're not going to win. It's really just going to be about what team in the division beats up on them the most. Hopefully their young guys in their farm system can really make some moves, but we try to be positive on the Marlins, and at least maybe they'll have something going on, but I don't see good things for them. Maybe they'll just continue to trade and get good prospects.
Yeah, so looking at the Marlins, I mean, I just don't know how you lose 100 games last year and then start off your offseason by trading away probably your best batter in the lineup, Jake Burger, by the way, when he still had 4 years left on his contract. That's not something I think any rebuilding team should do. Like when they traded for Jake Burger originally, I'm pretty sure they extended him and he had 4 years left on his deal. So if he was like a free agent or something the following year, then go ahead, trade him to Texas, get prospects or whatever you can possibly get. But trading away your best bat and then not really making a move that can coincide with it, at least, I just don't understand why any team would do that. So I really hate to say it. I think the Marlins might have the worst record in the National League this season, but among National League teams. But we'll get to the predictions in the standings here shortly. But I'm going to talk about the Phillies. Take it over to Philly. So before I do that, though, let's see here. Adam says, since Mike and Ricky both live in NL East territory, Alden, which NL East team would be the most fun road trip destination? So, man, I've rarely been to the East Coast. I've actually been to DC before when I was about 9 or 10. So I was there for a week, visiting a bunch of iconic places. But that's as far in the East as I've really ever been. But honestly, in the NL East, Miami has always been one of my places to travel to. So I'd probably throw Miami in there, even though it's kind of funny. I think they're going to finish last place and be the worst team in that division. But yeah, for me, I'd say Miami would be the most fun road trip destination for me. I don't know, what Ricky or Mike may think, but
We're all
right,
dirty
but
East Coast cities, so I mean, take your pick.
I have Atlanta for me. I've been Philly. I've tried to get to, haven't gotten to yet. I would love to go. I'm always trying to go further south. So for me, it would be Atlanta.
Yeah, people have told me Atlanta's like the New York of the South. I don't know if that's close, but that's what I hear. But regarding the Phillies, I did talk about one time how I thought they were losers in the offseason, and my opinion is still on that, not because I think they're a bad team. I still think the Phillies are going to get back to the postseason, but I don't know how they go from getting obliterated in the NLDS as a first-seeded team by a division rival, and they look at the offseason that the Mets had, they look at the offseason that the Braves had, and of course we'll get to the Braves here in a minute, and of course even the offseason that the Nationals had, I think the Nationals made more interesting moves than the Phillies did this offseason. That may be a long shot, but they did add Luzardo to their pitching. So, that's about a good enough move for their pitchers. But the fact that I don't really think that the Phillies made another move this offseason that's really going to be like, okay, yeah, the Phillies are going to get back to first seed. They're going to get back to the DS, have home field advantage. They're going to maybe get back to the World Series. So I think the Phillies just are a team where, as of right now, I don't think they're as frightening as they were these last couple years. I do, but knowing Dave Dombrowski, I could see the Phillies making some big trade deadline moves, which is something we see Dombrowski do quite a bit. So, but as of right now, it's just I don't feel like the Phillies are really a team that can compete with the Braves and the Mets. I think that they both had off seasons, and plus the Braves are getting guys back from injury. And I don't think people realize that, the Braves, when they're healthy, they can compete with anybody. So I will wait until the trade deadline to see what the Phillies do, because I could see the Phillies having a big trade deadline. But as of right now, and Phillies Sports Talk, Cash and Chris in the chat, Kepler and Jordan Romero. Oh, he did get Max Kepler. Okay, yeah. But like I said, I think that when the trade deadline comes and when Dombrowski sees the team that the type of team that the Phillies are, I think that's when he'll start making moves. But as of right now, it really just depends on how they play in the first half of the season. But if things don't really go the way that the Phillies think that it'll go, I could see Rob Thompson on the hot seat this season. That's a take I have on the Phillies, but it really just depends on, obviously how their pitching is. They had their guys on the pitching looked really good last season. At the beginning of the year, they had guys that were capable of Cy Young seasons, like three different guys. Christopher Sanchez, Ranger Suarez had a great ERA at one point, and of course, Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola. But for me, it really just depends on obviously the bullpen as well too, which is a big reason why they lost to the Mets last season. So this division, definitely something to look at regarding that. But so we saved the Braves and the Mets for the final two. So I'll start off. We'll start off with the Mets since we got Ricky on here. Obviously, the Mets had a really good offseason. But regarding the Mets, do you think that they'll live up to what their team looks like on paper?
That's the danger in Mets history, is they've never really seemed to follow up a good year with another good year. The last time they really did that was 2015. They made it to the World Series. And then 2016, they lost in the wild card game to San Francisco. Can they now be the hunted and pick up the good mojo where they had last year? Some of that mojo is gone because they let Jose Iglesias go to the San Diego Padres, but they have a lot of depth, and that's, I think, a reason why Iglesias isn't back there. You look at the Mets, and it starts with Soto. I mean, Soto changes that offense. He's already having a really good spring. We'll see what Mark Vientos does in year two. They bring Pete Alonso back. Lindor's still in the mix. Brandon Nimmo's dealing with some knee issues to start off the year. But from a 1 through 5 perspective, it's a pretty good lineup. If they get Alvarez back, he'll be a help behind the plate. The question marks for me for the Mets are starting pitching. Sean Manaea is out to begin the year with the oblique issue. And Frankie Montas, who I don't know why they banked on Frankie Montas because he's always hurt. He's out with the lat strain. So they're relying a lot on Kodai Senga. Could he stay healthy for a whole year? Could David Peterson pick up where he left off last season? Clay Holmes has been a revelation in spring training with his kick change up, and he's throwing 67 pitches and really doing a good job. But can Clay Holmes be your number 3? We're going to find out. And I think in the bullpen, what's the bridge to Edwin Diaz? AJ Minter right now is injured, but I think he could be a big help. I'm not sure what this Met team has potential to be good. It's going to be just about health with them because I think their pitching is only going to take them to that point. Last year, they got some really good pitching in the playoffs and some timely hitting. I think losing Jose Quintana is going to hurt more than actually it seems because he was consistent for them. You like what Carlos Mendoza's doing. He's got a good vibe, but can they pick up where they left off? It's going to be something to watch.
Yeah, obviously the offseason that the Mets had after going to the NLCS, you would think, yeah, adding Juan Soto, getting some bullpen pieces like Clay Holmes and AJ Minter that, their bullpen would look pretty good. So, obviously it's all about performing the way the team looks on paper. And we did see this in 23. They spent money and it's almost like they skipped steps and they just went all the way back to the bottom. And then in 2024, they started off, okay, yeah, it's same old issue. And then they had an amazing second half and went on to the NLCS. So yeah, for the Mets, obviously injuries, despite Alvarez's injury, the Mets still have really good bats. So even obviously they don't have their catcher behind the plate, and that's going to affect them. But I am interested in seeing. I don't know, Ricky, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I don't know how much Acuna is going to play on the Mets this year. But if he does play on the Mets a lot this year, that's a player that I'm looking forward to seeing. I don't know if he's really going to get a whole lot of playing time, but
I think he will. I think when you look at between him, they're trying to find a role for Brett Beatty, who I think if Mark Vientos is the third baseman in opening day last year, they win the division. But Brett Beatty right now is always good in spring, but he gets to the regular season, he tends to struggle. Remember, Ronnie Mauricio is still there too, and he didn't play last year because of an ACL injury. So there's a lot of depth internally in that Met system. They have to kind of figure out who's right for what role and who isn't right for that role. Because they also have some depth in the outfield. I mean, you add Jose Siri, you bring Jesse Winker back. I mean, who knows if even Starling Marte makes this? Does they trade Marte this offseason? Is he there as a DH? So there's a lot of depth and moving pieces they have to figure out. It's a good problem to have, but I mentioned Acuna is going to be interesting because, again, Jeff McNeil's still there. Do they put McNeil in the outfield and put Acuna at second base like we saw at points last year? But they tried Acuna in the outfield. Jet Williams is a prospect they like. They tried him in the outfield because he can't play short because Lindor's there. How does David Stearns and Mendoza really parse this depth out is going to be an interesting, not dilemma, but interesting question to watch.
right. So, Mike, what do you got for the Mets?
Well, it's hard to look at the Mets and not just absolutely fall in love with the bats in this lineup. I mean, you've got Lindor, you've got Soto, you've got Pete Alonso back, you've got Jesse Winker back. You've got a pretty strong lineup top to bottom. But Ricky kind of brought up the point already. I'm concerned about the pitching. You look at their main competition in this division. Everybody's got great lineups. The Braves have a great lineup when everybody's healthy. The Phillies have a great lineup, but I worry about the Mets pitching, and especially with the injuries that were brought up as well, is can the pitching do enough to put down these other great offensive teams? You can only win so many games when it's like 10-9, 11-8, those high scoring affairs. It can get taxing after a while. And it's the injury to Alvarez. It's rough, but whoever fills in from him, as long as I've learned this with catcher fill-ins, just be good behind the plate. And then they'll just hide you somewhere in the lineup, probably in the 7 spot or the 8 spot, so you don't do too much damage. So I'm less worried about Alvarez, although it sucks to lose such a good, young, promising player. My chief concern with the Mets is the pitching. And to me, right now, if you look at those 3 teams, the Braves, the Phillies, and the Mets, that might be, to me, on paper, the deciding factor in how they'll perform once you get into the season.
Yeah, definitely. And since we haven't really gotten to the Braves that much yet, so I guess I'll start off with the Braves. I think that the Braves I don't think people realize the fact that you can name a starter on the Braves from last year. They dealt with some type of injury last year. I think the Braves were the most injured team in baseball last year, and they still got to the wild card. And yes, it was a weird tiebreaker between the D-backs, Mets, and Braves, and that's how it unfortunately ended up for my team. But the fact that they still got to the wild card, yes, they got swept, against a red hot Padres team. But the fact that they're getting those guys back now, I could see the Braves getting back to that 100 win mark if they continue to stay healthy. Acuna, if he can get back into MVP form, it really depends on how he bounces back from I'm pretty sure it was the opposite knee compared to what it was in 2021. So he has knee injuries on both knees now. So you would think, is Acuna gonna be the same Ronald Acuna that we saw a couple years ago, or are the Braves gonna have to rely on another best hitter? And of course, Spencer Strider's also coming back, a guy who missed the entire year as well for the most part. So with the guys that the Braves are getting back, I could see the Braves getting back to 100 wins, maybe even winning the division. So I know this division really comes between three teams in my book, and it really just depends on who stays healthy the most, and of course the pitching. I think pitching is what we're looking at regarding the Phillies, Braves, and the Mets for who wins this division. So, but Ricky, regarding the Braves though, how do you see the Braves?
I mean, you hit on the nail on the head, Alden. The injuries really doomed this team last year, but you're gonna get Acuna hopefully back in May. You're gonna hopefully get Spencer Strider back in the first couple of months. And when you have Chris Sale and Spencer Strider at the top of the rotation, I don't want to play that team in a best of 3 or a best of 5. And you think about the emergence of Spencer Schwellenbach last year, who's one of the best pitchers in baseball in the second half. You look at Ronaldo Lopez, see what he can do. They still have a guy like who knows what Ian Anderson gives them. I mean, we remember him from a couple years ago pitching in a World Series. I mean, he could be a guy that plays a factor. I like their lineup. Again, Sean Murphy's out to begin the year, but it's kind of that whole, like Mike was saying, with the whole plug a catcher in kind of thing. When you have Jared Kelenic in your 9 spot, it's not really a bad lineup. It's actually pretty solid. And I think Brian Snitker has done a really good job as a manager. I think he's one of the better ones in the sport. My big question with Atlanta is going to be the bullpen. We know how good Raisel Iglesias is, but what's that middle relief look like between Pierce Johnson, Aaron Bummer? They add Hector Neris as a non-roster invitee, but there's no clear setup piece, and they did lose Minter in the division. Does Atlanta go out in this trade deadline and buy a piece? We know Anthopoulos doesn't usually go big at the deadline, and you have GMs like Dombrowski and Stearns that will make that move if they need to. So can Anthopoulos keep up and make that deal? Because I think really it's the one weakness Atlanta has is pitching, but I think bullpen more so than rotation. Because we know the Braves usually call up a starter and he finds a way to make an impact. Someone like a Bryce Elder or AJ Smith-Shawver, like they usually find a way to call somebody up for a month and they do a good job.
Yeah, and we go back to the trade deadline. Well, these three teams we think are the real deal for the division, but obviously the trade deadline is really the teams in this division really get involved in that. But Mike, before we predict who we think is going to finish in that division from first to last, what do you think about the Braves going into the season?
Well, not to sound like a broken record here, but your division predictions 9 times out of 10 for the NL East are going to be based off of how healthy do you think the Braves are going to be this season. If you think that they're going to get over their injury woes or at least digress to like a norm where you don't have this abnormally high number of injuries, losing a whole bunch of games, then this team is one of the definite favorites for sure. We can't understate the benefit they get of getting a Ronald Acuna back into the lineup. Even though he started off the year kind of on a down year anyways, you can't forget the 2023 Ronald Acuna that took the league by storm, and some of these other, bats. We haven't talked. Amazingly, we've managed to not talk about. And he's dealing with an injury, but when healthy, Jurickson Profar, coming over from San Diego. If he can get over his day-to-day injury, that's a really nice bat to be able to add into the lineup as well. So they have good depth. They have a good starting rotation, like we've discussed. It's all going to come down to health. And hopefully, age, father time, maybe laying off some of these guys that are starting to get, a little bit up there. Guys like Marcell Ozuna, Matt Olson, hopefully father time can wait a little bit longer on them before starting to have an impact. But yeah, the Braves, if healthy, we'll get to my division predictions here in a second.
Yeah, so we're gonna get right to that. So we're gonna predict the NL East and who we think is going to take that division from first to last. So we'll start off with Ricky from last to first. NL East. What do you got?
Last is Marlins. I think we're all going to agree there. Just not enough there. 4, I'm going to go with the Nationals. Again, I think I'm interested to see some of their younger pitching and somebody like a Cade Cavalli. I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens with him. Their offense will take a step further, but they're not quite ready yet. I'm going to go with the Mets at 3. I think they're going to be strong, but can that rotation keep up for a whole year? Is going to be a big question. Tyler McGill is the next factor for me. He's had a good spring, and he's stepped up into big spots for this team. I'm going to go the Phillies 2. Actually, no, strike that. I'm going to go Atlanta 2. I think just because Acuna and Strider aren't starting the year, I think could be the difference, but I still think they're a playoff team. And the Phillies, I'm going to go with number 1. I know they didn't make any huge moves, but when you throw Luzardo as your 5, you don't really need to make, I think that's a good move. They still have Alvarado, Ori, and Kierling in the bullpen with Jordan Romano. Dombrowski usually makes a move. And we saw Bryce Harper kind of say, look, if the Phillies would have got Pete Alonso, he would have moved to the outfield. So we know Bryce Harper will move positions if they need to. I think moving Trey Turner to leadoff would help, especially giving Schwarber some RBI opportunities. So I think Philadelphia is still the team to beat in this division, just because I think they're well-rounded offensively, and that starting pitching depth from Wheeler, Nola, Suarez, Sanchez, Luzardo, going to be a tough 5 to beat.
Yeah, definitely this division could go either way. We've just like the other divisions we predicted pretty much. But Mike, what do you got last to first?
Last, Marlins, nothing really much to say there. Like you said, we're all in agreement. The Nationals 4, I think there are a couple of divisions in this league where maybe the Nats could be reasonable competitors for like top 3, but this is not one of them. Just too much youth, too much concern about the pitching, to have a ton of confidence in them to finish above any of the other 3 teams. I'm going to agree with Ricky. I'm going to have the Mets at 3 here. To me, like I said, when you put those 3 teams next to each other, it comes down to the starting rotation. And the Mets have similar, kind of concerns in the back end of the bullpen to some of these other teams, but it's the starting rotation to me that's the big thing. I think the other 2, just their starting rotations are just too good to ignore that advantage they'll have over the Mets, even if the Mets on paper might have the better offense overall than the other 2. At number 2, to deviate from Ricky a little bit, I'm going to put the Phillies in at number 2. My preference for them would have been to find a better upgrade over Nick Castellanos in the outfield. He has his moments, but I think on the whole, he's not, a team like the Phillies could, try to find somebody a little bit better to man one of the corner outfield spots. And also, you've got Kyle Schwarber's bat, who, Schwarber is good to start popping home runs at any moment, but he's also good to start striking out 3 to 4 times a game at any moment. So I think they could have, to Alden's point about the offseason, it would have been nice to see them maybe swap out some of these guys for, more reliable defender in the corner outfield, more, reliable bat to put in the DH spot, things like that, guys that they could have potentially upgraded. Not that Castellanos or Schwarber are necessarily bad players, but there were other options out there for them that might have been slightly better. But the rotation is phenomenal. They're good. That's going to win them a lot of games on their own. And I think it's going to be very close, but I do have the Braves. Like I said, I don't think you can understate the benefit they get of getting Acuna back healthy, of getting more of their guys back healthy. I'm assuming, like I said, a regression back to the normal amount of injuries. And this team was already close last year to the Phillies, for parts of the season at least, in the standings. And I think getting that little bit of extra boost combined with the Phillies maybe not necessarily doing a ton, and then that Mets rotation, I think that just gives them that little bit of an edge. But it's going to be close. This is a division that could come down. Those 3 are going to be in it probably into the last 2 weeks of the season.
Yeah, it's like I said just now, it's pretty much all about those 3 teams. But without going completely into detail, I'll just say it right there. I agree with Mike's 5, and that's my 5 as well. Marlins at last. I mean, Marlins, you can give me a tryout and it would just be the same thing. So, I mean, Miami, put them at last. Nationals at 4. The Nationals, I do think that I don't put them at 4 because I think they're a bad team or anything like that. I just think that the inexperience, the youth, and of course with the pitching in question, I don't think they're ready to compete with the other 3 teams in the East yet. But I do think that they're a couple years away from being playoff contenders again. Really, just depends on how they continue their rebuild and how they continue developing players. Uh, and the Mets at 3. Obviously, like Ricky said, the Mets have this odd, weird habit of not having back-to-back good seasons. And yes, the pitching and the injuries are a concern for the Mets, but obviously if they live up to the offseason that they had, and if Juan Soto does Juan Soto with Lindor and all these other guys as well, they do have a chance to win that division. And when I put the Mets at 3, I don't think that the Phillies and Braves are going to finish ahead of them by like 10 plus games or anything like that. This will be a very tight race for the 3 teams. And then I got the Phillies at 2. I still think that the Phillies have a good team. I think they'll get back to the playoffs. For the Phillies, for me, it really just depends on the managing. For me, it depends on Rob Thompson. There's been times where Rob Thompson has this odd habit of taking pitchers out when he shouldn't, keeping pitchers in when he shouldn't. It's just this weird trend that I see with Rob Thompson. I think there was one time last year, I forgot what pitcher it was, but there were a couple times where he took a pitcher out when he was dealing a no-hitter, and it's like, what? And then he puts in a bullpen pitcher, he gives up the lead. So, and the bullpen also is something about the Phillies that, some guys in there will hold up their end of the bargain, but the bullpen, like I said, was a factor in them getting knocked out in the DS last year. So for me, it really depends on Rob Thompson and the bullpen for the Phillies. But like I said, as of right now, this is what we all think. Come the trade deadline, that's when it's really going to be the big deal for this division, and especially with Dombrowski making a move this here and that, which we normally see him do. And then I have the Braves winning the division. I think, even though they don't have Acuna and Strider until I think you said May, it's they dealt with not having Strider and Acuna the entirety of last year, and they still were pretty close to getting, and they were close with the Phillies for a while until they weren't. So I think that when they do get those guys back, obviously they have like a little over a month in between of not having them, but when they do get them back and they are fully healthy, we've seen them do it before, winning 100 games. Obviously, sometimes in the playoffs they'll, make mistakes in there. But regarding this division, though, I think that the Braves are the team to beat for this season. Being healthy again, trying to get back to the playoffs, and it really does depend on how Acuna responds from both of his knee injuries, I guess you can say. And obviously, of course, they have the proven manager to lead the Braves. So I got Braves, Phillies, Mets, Nationals, and Marlins. So that was our NL East preview. We're going to take our second and final break. When we come back, we're going to check in on NCAA baseball and softball, and then we'll close it out with Around the Diamond like always. So don't go anywhere. We will be right back. You're listening to the Bullpen Bulletin here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. We'll be right back.
Cleveland and Columbus sports fans, I've got the show for you. I'm Jen B, host of the Show of the Land right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. You want football? I've got the Browns, the Buckeyes, the Eagles, the Purple Raiders, and more for you. You want basketball? I've got the Cavs and the Charge for you. You want hockey? I've got the Blue Jackets and the Monsters for you. You want football, aka soccer? I've got the Crew and the Crunch for you. You want volleyball? I'm going to unleash the fury for you. You want more Cleveland and Columbus sports? I've got them all for you, from the majors to the minors to the college rinks. Catch me, Jen B, every week on the Show of the Land right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sport.
Are you a fan of Minnesota sports? Do you love the Vikings and hate the Packers? Are you a fan of the Timberwolves, Twins, Wild, Lynx, St. Paul Saints? Here on the Bold North Breakdown, we'll talk about all of those professional teams as well as all the college teams in the area. That's your basketball teams, football, hockey, volleyball, men's and women's sports alike. We talk about them all. Here on the Bold North Breakdown. Join me, your host, Glenn Ritter, every Thursday night at 7 p.m. Central to discuss all that is happening in the Minnesota sports scene. Here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
And welcome back to the Bullpen Bulletin here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. If you guys are just not tuning in, we just covered up the NL East and who we think is going to win the division. And now we are going to go to the NCAA level, and we're going to start off with baseball and our check-in on certain teams. So, Ricky, what team and or player would you like to mention for NCAA baseball here today?
We're going to go off the beaten path just a little bit. We're going to go away from the major conferences and go to the Big West. We're going to talk about the Gauchos of UC Santa Barbara. Right now, they're number 15 in the country, and they had something cool happen over the weekend in a battle with I think it's Cal State Northridge. The Latrey McCullum not only had a walk-off 2-run home run to get the victory for UC Santa Barbara, who's undefeated in the Big West, but he had the walk-off home run to complete the cycle. That did not happen since Michael Young back in 1997. He went 4 for 4 at the plate and had a hit by pitch and had 2 steals. So not a bad game overall for Latrey McCullum, to say the least. And this is a UC Santa Barbara team that usually does pretty well in the regionals. They can get, I think, a pretty good run. Last year, he was a Big West Academic All-Conference guy, played right field, hit .320, had 14 RBIs. So we talk about these major conferences a lot. Got to give some love to the smaller conferences. So UC Santa Barbara gets some love this week. They play Hawaii over the weekend. So nice trip out to Honolulu for them this week.
Definitely nice. I'm going to take it over to Arkansas, talk some Razorbacks baseball. I think that Arkansas, I wanted to point out one series that's coming up on Friday. So coming up, they're playing 3 games against Ole Miss, who's ranked 13th. So that's what I would say my series of the week regarding baseball. And Arkansas is also on an 11-game win streak, and a majority of those wins, I think it was 6 or 7 of those games to be exact, they scored over 10 runs, and one of them they put up 20 runs, which is we've seen a lot in baseball nowadays. It's just in college baseball nowadays. So their recent series, they swept Portland, and then the last time they played a ranked team, it was TCU, and they won that game in a close one. So it tends to be a trend for Arkansas. What I like to see is when they play all of these ranked teams in a series, it's a pretty good game to watch. So this Ole Miss and Arkansas series is something that college baseball fans should take a look at. And then they play South Carolina shortly after that. So that's another series that I think would be interesting as well. But overall, Arkansas looking really good in baseball. They're going up in the rankings too as they extend their winning streak. Like I said, they're at 11 wins now. So shout out to the Razorbacks, and it's looking really good over there for Arkansas baseball. But let's see, Mike, what do you got for baseball for NCAA?
So for NCAA baseball, I'm going to a team that is continuing some early season struggles, and that's Texas A&M. The Aggies, a team that came in with incredibly high expectations. They had that incredible opening weekend where they looked like the best team in baseball, but they started off the season 5-0. Since then, 5-6, dropping to 10-6 overall, plummeting down the rankings behind a lot of teams that are off to really good starts. And you look at the stats, and one of the things that stands out is Jace Laviolette, the guy who, very talented baseball player, very highly rated prospect. Those of you who are MLB draft enthusiasts know his name, as he's considered one of the top prospects in the upcoming MLB draft in July. Since his opening weekend, where he hit 3 home runs, his batting average is down to 235 on the season, and he's only hit 1 home run since. So major struggles from him. The team as a whole is batting 260, which at the MLB level, 260 is great. But at college, especially this early in the season, you see a lot of teams well into the 300s. So that batting average you would probably have to consider, especially amongst a ranked team, would be considered subpar. And also some struggles in the field. 20 errors in 16 games and has led to 10 unearned runs given up by the pitching. So some struggles on the diamond and at the plate, which unfortunately, because the pitching staff as a whole is actually doing okay. They have a 2.87 ERA. Usually that will play and that will get you some victories, but the bats have been inconsistent. The fielding's been poor. And if Texas A&M is going to turn it around, at least one of those things, preferably the bats, of course, because we all know offense is king in the college ranks, needs to turn it around.
Yeah, also for baseball, I wanted to point out recently a game just ended, but the good old Florida State and Florida rivalry, that game recently just ended, and the Gators got it done. They beat Florida State 7-2, so it wasn't really that close of a game, but both teams ranked in the top 10. So that was a good game if you're a Gators fan. But man, that was wow. It wasn't even. I thought that game would be a little bit closer, but take it over to softball now and do our NCAA softball check-in. Ricky, who do you got for NCAA softball?
Well, for softball this week, we're going to give some love to the great state of Washington. No, not DC. We're going to go actual to Washington. They took on Boise State this week and had a couple of cool things happen. Stevie Hansen, she threw a perfect game. So congratulations to Miss Hansen on that accomplishment. And a very good week for Alexis DeBoer. Now, she's a freshman. She was named the D1 Softball National Player of the Week. She hit .538, 5 home runs, 8 RBIs. Washington went 5-0 in what was the Black and Orange Classic. She had a game-time double against Idaho State. She had a multi-homer game against Montana. So a strong week for the Huskies. They will, as of the other day, 14 straight wins. We talk about the SEC a lot. Big Ten should get some love. Well, formerly the Pac-12, now the Big Ten. And Washington has a big matchup with Oregon this weekend at home. We talked about Oregon last week. So DeBoer, only a freshman, but we don't usually see freshmen put up these kind of numbers. So she might be a player to keep an eye on as we get into the spring for the Lady Huskies.
Yeah, so before I get to the team that I was going to talk about, I wanted to point out for softball, one of Florida State's pitchers, Mimi Gooden, pitched an immaculate inning today against Portland State. So I thought that was pretty cool to bring up. But for softball, I'm going to take it over to Auburn, a team that also continues to go up in the rankings. So they're currently 20-4 right now, but they are coming off of getting swept by Mississippi State. So they did lose a few, and after starting with only 1 loss. And let's see, I wanted to also point out, so they are playing Georgia Tech here soon, and then they take on number 5 ranked Texas A&M, and that's St. Patrick's week. So That series against Texas A&M for softball is a series that should be pretty interesting as well. And then they also take on Texas. So an SEC battle when they take on the Longhorns after that too. But overall, getting swept by Mississippi State, and two of them were close games too. It just came down to a late mistake by whoever made the first mistake, and it was Auburn. So two of those games that they could have won, one of them they lost by 5 runs. So yeah, Auburn took a tough beating there, but they have a chance to recreate a statement and upset number 5 Texas A&M, which is a series to really look at. But also regarding that, but Mike, for softball NCAA, who do you have?
Well, I'm going to take a page out of Ricky's book, What He Did in Baseball, and go a little off the beaten path to the great Commonwealth of Virginia and talk about the Liberty Flames softball team, who has won 9 straight games. They have creeped their way into the top 25 rankings in the AP poll, and I think they're going to continue to kind of creep their way up to 21-4 on the season. One of those victories, including, by the way, against a ranked Alabama team early on in the year. So they're doing it against some tougher competition as well. This team they're just playing great softball all the way around. They're hitting 345 as a team, including Rachel Rupe. I don't know how to pronounce that last name. It could go either way. But so far, she's batting 363, 7 home runs, and 18 of her 29 hits have been for extra bases. So incredibly productive there. Their pitching, they have a 2.06 ERA, very solid, especially when the offense is producing that way. A team that, maybe when you're looking at like deep postseason runs, maybe when they run up against the numerous SEC schools that are dominating college softball right now, maybe they won't make it too terribly far. But a team that, they keep this momentum going, they keep this rhythm going, they could at least make some noise in postseason play.
Yeah, definitely Liberty getting some really good love here. It's good to mention them too. We haven't really talked about them a lot, so it's good to see them looking good. But before we wrap up this episode, we're gonna go into our Around the Diamond segment and give our thoughts on anything regarding baseball, whether it's pros, minors, NCAA, which we already talked about, but anything extra to talk about. Ricky, what do you got regarding the whole baseball world?
Well, big series, 2 things. First, big series this weekend in softball, Florida at Texas. I'm sure we'll get into it at some point this year, but the SEC has like 14 ranked teams. It's crazy, but 2 top 3 teams going out in a 3-game series should be fun. But in terms of baseball, this is a good weekend. I know we're a week away from regular season baseball, but it's the spring breakout series this weekend. Now, what that is while spring training teams, they have the major league games, you also see top prospects from one team play top prospects from another team. And I know minor league baseball is a big thing now. It's covered more than ever before, and it's a great thing as someone who covered minor league baseball. It's so much fun. If you go to get MLB.tv, plus you get some cool nicknames throughout the year, some of these teams, but get a chance to see some of these top prospects that you hear so much about. I can know for the Guardians, like Travis Bazzana is one of those guys people want to see with the way he can hit the cover off the ball. Maybe you see that draft pick you haven't seen. I know, like for the Yankees, you see more George Lombard or Ben Hess. So there's a lot of different names to watch. So if you get a chance and your team broadcasts it, check out these spring breakout games this week and see your team's future.
Definitely. So while we were talking about Texas A&M's downfall, they did win by a lot today over a team that isn't really, but they were up 10-0 at one point in the 4th inning. So it's good to see that they're trying to get back on track at least. But yeah, 5-6 after starting 5-0, that's really not a good sign. And of course, when the University of Arizona beat them, Wildcat fans are still talking about it. It's like they were like, "Oh, Wildcat fans." They were like, "Yeah, we broke Texas A&M. We're the ones that sent them down." So I never hear the end of that. But yeah, regarding MLB, as far as spring training goes, now that the Athletics extended Lawrence Butler, I kind of want to go deeper into detail regarding the Athletics. So definitely over in the Goodyear area, see how the Athletics are doing regarding spring training, how their guys are doing. We may be talking about their division here pretty soon. And that AL East or West division is definitely division that also could go either way at this point, depending on certain teams. So we'll get into that division at some point, though, as we continue to discuss divisions before opening day. But a little bit about the Cubs and Dodgers Japan series that's coming up. Of course, obviously, Tony Gonzalez, who I forgot to bring up when we were talking about spring training updates earlier, but he's starting the season on the IL. So I thought that was a blow for the Dodgers. And Dustin May will most likely be the Dodgers' fifth starter. So after he came back from being out for the entire 24 season, so he will most likely be the Dodgers' fifth starter. And of course, we talked about this before the show started, but Dave Roberts got an extension. So some good news for the Dodgers, I guess, or the Dodgers fans that actually like him. But the Japan series, though, so it's we all knew this was going to happen, but it is officially official now. Yamamoto will pitch in game 1 and Sasaki will pitch in game 2. So that's official now. And Imanaga will pitch game 1 and Justin Steele will pitch game 2 for the Japan series for the Cubs. So that's I do want to watch that series, but I keep forgetting I'd have to wake up at 3 a.m. to watch that. So it's like, oh man, because I'm interested in watching, the Japan crowd and Otani and Imanaga and all these good Japanese players playing in their home country. I was looking forward to seeing that culture and how Japan really does embrace baseball because that's their sport. But I am definitely going to at least look at that series, even if I can't watch it live. So that is coming up very soon. But Mike, what do you got regarding baseball?
So I'm going to go back to Baltimore here a little bit. The Orioles had a great moment in their spring training game against Pittsburgh a few days ago when top prospect Samuel Basallo, number 13 ranked prospect in all of baseball, not just in the Orioles organization, cranked a home run that I'm pretty sure has not landed yet. I think the ball left the stadium and just kind of kept sailing and has not come down yet. But actually, it has come down. It went 420 feet, one of those no doubters. He's a guy who has been of serious intrigue to Oriole enthusiasts for some time. He is probably going to be up in Triple-A Norfolk this year. Only 20 years old, international prospect. Team is still trying to figure out where he fits positionally, especially since his natural position is catcher, and they have a guy by the name of Adley Rushman currently manning the catching spot there in Baltimore. So finding how he fits in the lineup is still an area of discussion, but a guy to definitely know the name because if he's going to be doing that against major league pitching, he's a guy who you're going to want to know.
Yeah, definitely. And Ralph came in here right on time before we were going to end it. He said, tuning in late, enjoying retired life here in Florida, met a Cardinals fan heading to spring training. Yeah, shout out to Ralph. Make sure to check out his show, The Yinzer Report. And Ralph has a question. Have you guys ever been to a spring training game anywhere? Well, I live in Arizona, so yes, of course. We have so many spring training games here in so many different ballparks. I think the last one I went to was over in Peoria, where the Mariners and Padres play. So I may be going to one this Saturday when the Diamondbacks play. Um, and I think the Diamondbacks are actually playing 2 games on that day, so I may be able to watch, well, both, depending on how tired I am by the second game. But this Saturday, I may be going to one. So maybe, maybe not. But Ricky and Mike, what you got for Ralph's question?
Can't say I've ever been to one, sadly.
Not on my list, unfortunately. I would say if there was a ballpark I'd love to go look at, I would think the Pirates one in Bradenton looks pretty cool. So we'll shout out Ralph Moore with some Pittsburgh love. That would be one. Probably that or I think the Rays out in Port. Not the Rays. The Braves I think are out in like Northport or something. Or one of those ballparks for sure. Braves used to be at the Wide World of Sports in Kissimmee, which was actually really cool.
Yeah, definitely. But great question, Ralph. Great to see you in the chat. But that's going to do it for episode 4 of the Bullpen Bulletin. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Make sure, like I said, we covered a lot regarding the Lawrence Butler contract extension, the Garrett Cole injury. We'll see how that affects the Yankees. And, of course, spring training as it continues. We're getting closer to opening day. We're getting closer to the Cubs and Dodgers 2-game Japan series. Go Cubs, secretly. And we covered the NL East, and we predicted the NL East. We'll be back next week to talk about who we think is going to win whatever division we come to agree with. Whether I think we got 3 divisions left, which is the 2 Central divisions and the AL West. So we may be going out west or staying in the Central. We'll see what happens, but we will cover every division before opening day as we get closer. And of course, next week, a lot more interesting topics that will come out. And if they do come out, we will be the ones here to talk about it once again every Tuesday evening. And of course, next week we'll give our updated thoughts on NCAA baseball and softball. But man, I don't know about you guys. I'm excited for opening day drastically more than any other sport right now. I'm definitely excited to see the Diamondbacks play again. Can't wait to see how these other teams do as well. But regarding as we get closer to opening day, definitely we'll be looking forward to seeing how the young guys finish out spring training, who the final rosters will be, and really who gets sent back down to the minor leagues, who stays in the major leagues. There's a lot of prospects that are up and coming. There's a lot of guys that will have an opportunity with the limited amount of time that we have left in spring training. And of course, as spring training goes on, hopefully no other injuries go on, because we've seen enough of this in the MLB already, and the season hasn't even started yet. So I want to watch a really good MLB season, and when injuries get in the way, it's really tough to see certain teams thrive when they should be. But hopefully injuries get very limited once again as we get closer to opening day. Really cannot wait. We may even talk about some pitcher versus pitcher games that we're excited to see in the future. Of course, we talked about pitchers a lot in today's episode and who we think can go far. We may have some ideas on next week's episodes. But once again, thank you guys for tuning in to the Bullpen Bulletin episode 4. I'm Alden K. Got Mike Patt and Ricky K with me. Great to have another show with you guys. We'll see you guys next Tuesday evening. Have a great week. And stay safe, and we will be back next Tuesday. See you guys then. Have a good one.